May I now call on the Director of Climate Science Watch Government Accountability Project, Mr. Rick Piltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to present testimony at this hearing. In my written testimony, I addressed several issues that I believe are of particular significance for congressional oversight at this time. Very briefly, a few key points. First, on the administration's suppression of the National Assessment of Climate Change Impacts. In the 1998 to 2000 timeframe, the Federal Climate Research Program initiated, pursuant to the Global Change Research Act, a project to assess the potential consequences of climate variability and change for the United States. A multi-agency coordination effort supported assessment activities involving hundreds of scientists and stakeholders in 19 regions around the country, including the Pacific Islands, Alaska, the Gulf Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, and others. In November 2000, an independent synthesis panel made up of leading scientists and other experts issued this report that to this day remains the most comprehensive, scientifically based assessment of the potential consequences of climate change for the United States. The national assessment was designed to become an ongoing process to support national preparedness in dealing with global climate change. But the Bush administration abandoned support for this process of communication between scientists and stakeholders and has failed to move forward with a follow-on national assessment report. The administration has suppressed discussion and use of the National Assessment Report by federal agencies in research and assessment activities, and has suppressed references to it in published program documents, including annual program reports to Congress that for 9 years I edited while working for the climate change program. It is my understanding that the White House, through the agency of the Council on Environmental Quality, directed this suppression, which was then implemented by the CCSP leadership during the last 5 years. Myron E. Bell of the industry-funded policy group, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, has been quoted as saying, "To the degree that it has vanished, we have succeeded." And in fact, the administration and the CCSP leadership essentially made the national assessment vanish in the strategic plan for the U.S. Climate Change Science Program issued in 2003. The National Research Council has used and praised the national assessment as an important and credible study and was critical of the program's unjustified failure to incorporate and build on the national assessment in its strategic plan. The White House Science Office, Council on Environmental Quality, and the CCSP leadership have stonewalled the Academy by failing to respond to and address this criticism by providing any justification for their actions, scientific or otherwise. I see the administration's treatment of the 2000 national assessment as the political interference with scientific integrity that has done and continues to do the greatest damage in undermining national preparedness in dealing with the challenge of global climate change. I believe it would be appropriate for the committee to investigate this, and even more important, for Congress to move to revitalize what should become an ongoing national assessment process. High-level support for this kind of direct, unfiltered communication between scientists and stakeholders would convey important information to policymakers and society about climate change impacts and potential response strategies. Also, the administration has acted in a variety of ways to impede and manipulate communication about climate change by federal scientists to wider audiences, including Congress and the media. And it's not so much interference with what's published in the technical journals, but it's when the science comes forward and is communicated to a wider audience, Congress, the media, the public, that the political gatekeepers step in through a variety of mechanisms. Last week, the Union of Concerned Scientists and the Government Accountability Project released their joint report, Atmosphere of Pressure. This report investigation uncovered new evidence of widespread political interference in federal climate science. 150 federal climate scientists reported collectively at least 435 such incidents of political interference during the past 5 years. More than 100 survey respondents reported changes or edits during review of their work that changed the meaning of their findings. That number should be 0. Political interference in climate science has moved from the anecdotal to the epidemic. And even if we succeed in lifting this heavy hand of censorship, there is still the problem of getting the political leadership to embrace the findings that are put forward by the scientists and act on them to translate them effectively into national policy. Because this atmosphere of pressure that we have been seeing has serious consequences for the nation's ability to have access to the best available scientific information for understanding and responding to climate change. The UCS GAP report has a set of recommendations that ensure basic freedoms for government scientists and that taxpayer-funded science sees the light of day without manipulation of climate science communication by political gatekeepers. Congress should act to extend whistleblower protection to scientists who report interference. Federal scientists have a constitutional right to talk about any subject so long as they speak as a private citizen, and the public has the right to hear them. A case example of my own personal experience with what I consider inappropriate White House political interference with climate change program reports produced by career federal science professionals is summarized and explained in my written testimony. I'll conclude on that. I'd be pleased to answer any questions. If I could just add one additional item, Dr. Brennan referred to the U.S. climate change science program budget as $2 billion. In fact, it was $2 billion in 2004. But the administration has steadily cut back the funding for climate change research to the point where in the President's fiscal 08 request the other day, that budget request is now $1.5 billion. That is an almost 30% cut in real terms in the climate research budget in 4 years, and almost all of that can be accounted for by cutbacks in the global climate observing system, the NASA NOAA observing system, which is in a state of crisis. Dr. Anthes has addressed that. I address it also in my written testimony, but I urge the committee to look into this. I think it's a tremendously important issue for oversight and to be rectified by congressional action. Thank you.